Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to the SharePoint conference. Hopefully you've all been in the keynote. I had Steve speaking, giving a bit of history about the conference and where it's come from. It's an interesting one this year because we've got a new product coming out, or it's been released now, so there's a lot of information there, which is good. Hopefully my topic is going to be quite relevant still. Talking about a large-scale enterprise upgrade, it's quite prudent. A lot of people are going to be thinking about this soon. The scenario I've been through for the past couple of years is SharePoint 2007 to 2010. However, it's just as relevant. I'm not talking about anything technical here today. There's no PowerShell scripts, no demos or anything. It's the process behind it, things that we've learned on a large scale that you might want to think about. So a little bit about me. My name is Mark Stokes. I run a small partner consultancy up in Manchester called Redplane. My new website just went live yesterday. Hopefully I'll put more content on there over the next few weeks. If you have any questions about what I talk about today, then you can email me direct there, Twitter at Mark Stokes. So that's me. Also I organise the SharePoint user groups up in Manchester. So how many people here actually know of the user group, have heard of it? Good. How many people have never heard of the SharePoint user group in the UK? Okay. Right, if you haven't been to one before, then find your local ones, because most of the speakers that are here today will actually come and talk at the user groups as well, and that's their free sessions. They're not backed by any sponsors or anything, so it's definitely worth checking out the local user groups where you are and going and seeing those. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today, this is the only flashy graphic I've got in my presentation, so I apologise, they're really boring slides, but they're just there as prompts and something to use as notes afterwards. So we're going to be talking about a migration. The scenario is an upgrade. In this case, as I said, it's a 2007 to 2010. There's nothing specific to that particular project, nothing specific to those two technologies. This is something we can use across any upgrade process. So if we're going from 2010 to 2013, this stuff's still just as relevant, so I've tried to keep it fairly agnostic of the technology. So some of the things we're going to be looking through is, first of all, making the decision to upgrade in the first place, and then auditing our current environment, and then go into a little bit of a process. There's a bit of a cyclic process here we want to go through in the middle of the project, sort of planning, preparing, testing, implementing, validating and remediate, and then back to planning and just going through that, and all the while communicating. So that's my flashy graphic. I was quite proud of that. Then we go into, once we've done this part of it, then we go into what actually happens on the migration weekend, how we actually do the upgrade and the steps involved there, and then look at some post-go live support, and the most important part of the whole project is the launch party. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we actually need to decide that we want to upgrade. So how do we go through that thought process? We need to think about why are we thinking about upgrading? What are the business drivers? Are we talking about upgrading the product because it's new, just because it's cool, you know, there's a new version out there, we need to be upgrading to it? Is that why we decided to do it? Maybe we're out of support from Microsoft, so maybe our licenses are expiring, so we need to upgrade to a new version to renew them. Maybe it's an old version of product, maybe it's SharePoint 2003 and it's out of support, so we need to be upgrading to keep in a supported scenario. Maybe we're going through a fresh start. We need to rebuild the environment. Our hardware is 4 or 5 years old and we're going to recycle it anyway, so we think about upgrading the software at the same time. Maybe there's new features in the new product that we actually want to use or we need to use. So this is, for me, the best reason to upgrade. So then the next part is, do you actually need to upgrade? So with the scenario you've currently got, the platform you've got, do you actually need to upgrade? Can you actually get the features that you need out of your existing environment, or do you need to upgrade to get them? So do we need to do this? There's also excuse me. So we need to think about what's the return on investment. So do we need to go there? Now coming on to, should we upgrade? There's also a scenario as well. So we may want to upgrade to get the new features we said, and then, excuse me. There's also something to consider is, should we be upgrading? So we want to make sure we don't get too far behind the curve. So upgrading from SharePoint 2003 to 2007 is quite difficult. Going from 2003 to 2010 is even more difficult. Going from 2007, we know we can't go directly to SharePoint 2013. We have to go via 2010 unless we use third-party products. So there is a reason to actually upgrade and keep on the curve as well, so we don't have too difficult a job when we actually want to make that step up. Can we upgrade? So we need to think about whether our hardware is actually up to the job. So if we're going to reuse the hardware we've got in, will it support the new requirements for the new version of software? So again, SharePoint 2013, it has a lot of extra requirements than the old version, SharePoint 2010 or 2007. So can we upgrade? Can we afford to upgrade? The upgrade process is quite long. We need a team of people to do it. We need new hardware, new licenses. It's going to take time. There'll probably be a period of time that the environment's not actually in use. So can we afford to do it? It's an expensive job to do. So we need to think, first of all, is it something we should be doing? So hopefully we go through all those decisions. We decide, yes, OK, we're going to start the project. The next thing I want to do is start an audit of what we currently have. It's very important to understand where we're starting from. We probably have an understanding where we want to go, but the audit is very important. First thing I would do is start looking at the sites that we've got. For me, identifying any business critical or important sites at an early stage is really important. Get the site owners on board early. You want to keep these guys close. Because they're the ones that are going to shout when stuff doesn't go right or things change. So identify these sites nice and early. Try to find sites that may be incompatible with the new version. So in the scenario we went through 2007 to 2010, 2010 brought in a host of new features which actually made it difficult for some sites to upgrade. Most notably the list view thresholds, list throttling features. We had a lot of large lists that all of a sudden, once we ran through a test upgrade, they stopped working because their views had more than 5,000 items. So go through and start to understand what sites may be giving us problems as we go through. Some site templates and web templates may not be available, they may not be upgradable, so start looking at some areas that might give us some problems. Look for sites that are likely to break, that we just think might give us a headache. So sites that are highly customized, then maybe they're going to give us a headache when we go through the upgrade process. So start just looking at what you've got there and say, right, these are the ones that might be a problem, so we'll bring them in early and we'll get them on board. Excuse me. Sites with a lot of content as well, then these can quite often give us a headache. So we're just understanding what's there. We're not really doing anything with it at the moment, we just understand what's there and bringing the site owners in and explaining what we're looking at doing. We want to be looking at the content databases. So on smaller environments, maybe we've just got 1 or 2 content databases and it's not really a big issue. But as we get to an enterprise scale, and by enterprise scale, I'm talking sort of 50,000 plus users. The project we went through was 130,000 users. I should set the scene before. We're talking about 100 content databases, 18 terabytes of information, 10,000 team sites, 100 publishing sites. So it's just, and this is a worldwide organisation, so it's a 24/7 platform. So it's quite significant. I'm talking big scale here. So we had to go through and look at all the content databases, get an idea of what sites are in each content database, and also how large they are. So any content databases that are approaching their maximum size, then we know we may start to get some issues with those. So maybe through the upgrade process, we found out that the content databases tend to expand a bit in size while the schema is upgraded. Most of them settle back to about the same size, but some are inflated. So if you've got content databases that are approaching that limit, then find them early. So next thing to look at is the infrastructure. We need to make sure that the infrastructure we've got in place is actually still fit for purpose for the new version. So how fast is our network? How fast are the interconnects from our remote offices? Is the infrastructure up to the job? Understand, where are the weak points, because we may need to put some focus there. It's not just about servers and software. There's a lot of other supporting stuff that goes behind it. So understand what we've got in place in the business already. There's various tools available that help us go through this, things like the pre-upgrade check tools. Then they will actually highlight a lot of this for us. They'll identify things like the larger lists, so we can use these to start getting that understanding. I think there's a few third-party tools that will give an audit of the environments we've got, so they're quite nice to sit down and have a look at. The more work we do here, the better, because we know where to start focusing our attentions on the stuff that's likely to give us more problems over the migration process. Also, look for anything else that you think is important. So these are some of the things that in our environment were important to look at. SharePoint, as we know, is a massive product, so your own environments are probably going to have other areas that you've been working on. So as a typical consultant response, it depends what you need to look at here. You know, it depends on your own environment, what you're using, but really focus on figuring out what's there. It'll pay dividends. So the next thing we want to start doing is planning the upgrade. So planning what's it going to look like? What's the desired environment going to be? Are we looking at a cloud solution? Are we looking at Office 365 or a hosted cloud solution? Are we looking at staying on-premise or moving from a cloud to on-premise? Are we looking for a hybrid solution? So think about what we want it to look like. Maybe we're going to virtualize a lot more of the environment. Maybe we decide we want to stay physical boxes. How does it fit in our own organizations? Also, third-party customizations. I think I may have missed one, actually. There's one on here I just missed. Customizations. One of the most important things to look at are what customizations do we actually have in the environment. The project we worked through, what took us the most amount of time was actually the customizations, the custom code that we had in place. This is just internal code that was written by the company, and also any third-party tools. So at this kind of scale, we identified a number of third-party tools that didn't really scale to the size that we were talking about. So we had to work closely with them. And because you're engaging somebody else, then you need time to work with them, give them time to respond. Hopefully, if you're big enough, then they'll respond to your time frames. But this is a key one to figure out what you've got. So going back in, so when we're planning, think about on that customization side of it, what do we want the end environment to be? Do we actually want to start eliminating some of the customizations we've got to try and get rid of some of that complexity? Are we looking at standardizing components and third-party tools across the farm? Are we looking to increase the number of third-party components so we're not writing our own? Or just a straight migrate, just straight away upgrade it and then figure the rest out afterwards. So it gives us the opportunity to think about where we want to be at the end. We have various upgrade options. There's different ways of actually upgrading SharePoint. That we can do an in-place upgrade, just install a new version straight over the top. We can do a DB migrate, various other methods as well. Reality, I think it's generally agreed that there's only really one approach you want to be thinking, which is the DB migrate. You have to make your own decision on that, but think about how you actually want to be doing it. Think about your architecture and your infrastructure design as well. So again, what we're doing at this point, when we're planning the new environment, because up until now, new versions of SharePoint are really a brand new product. A lot of them are rewritten quite substantially. The architecture's changed quite a lot. So when we're planning the infrastructure and the architecture, we're kind of starting from scratch on that again, because there's a whole new set of requirements, whole new set of sort of limits and constraints there. We want to be focusing on it. Hopefully with 2013, I know Microsoft's now talking about moving to a 90-day release cycle online. Hopefully they want to try and move that into on-premise as well. So hopefully we won't have these as significant upgrades that we've had up till now. Whether that works out that way, no idea. I'm not holding my breath, but that's what they're talking about. So when we're looking at the architecture and the infrastructure design, yeah, we're starting from scratch. Sit down, do it the way you did it before. We've been through it before when we had our current environment. So think about what did we do well, what did we get right, what could we have done better. So use those learnings from going through it before and replan it. Also be aware that new versions have different requirements and different constraints. Like I said, SharePoint 2010 brought in the list view threshold limits on lists. We have a whole new set of constraints we need to work with. There's a whole new set of boundaries and limits. Some of them stay the same, some of them increase. So what we're actually creating our architecture for changes because the product's changing. Another thing to think about here as well is to plan for growth. So if you find over the last 5 years of using your current version, you've gone from 100 team sites to 1,000 team sites, then that's great, people are using it. However, if you've decided that you're in a position that you want to upgrade, it's probably because people are using the product more. So hopefully, as you go through an upgrade, the growth will increase as well, possibly to an exponential point. So don't just say, fine, in the last 5 years we've had 100 sites to 1,000 sites, therefore in the next 5 years we're going to have 2,000 sites. That's not necessarily the case. Plan for the growth you expect to see. If you're giving people better ways of doing things, they may be going out creating more sites. So don't just take what you've got and move that on. Think about how it's realistically going to change. Migration approach, so there's a couple of different ways of doing it. If you're a small environment, 10 people, 50 people, 100, 500, 1,000 people, your farm may not be too big. So maybe it's quite easy to go big bang and just move all the content over in one go. When you get to the scale that I was talking about before, then that's quite a difficult thing to do, and it's quite a risky thing to do, moving that whole set of content over. So maybe you want to think about a phased approach. Maybe you want to take your intranet sites first, make sure that all works okay, and then move your team sites over after, or do it progressively. So think about how we may be able to phase the upgrade and the migration. It potentially gives shorter outages for end users by going phased. It's easy to manage in case we need any rollbacks. We're not moving 18 terabytes of data back. We're just maybe moving a few intranet sites back. It gives us the ability to validate the new platform. So if we move a small section over, platform's nice and stable, then we have more confidence of moving the rest of the content over. It's easier to hand over to support teams. So again, they're not supporting everything. They're just supporting issues that get raised on the small amount of content that goes over. And it's a shorter period of post-go live support as well, because again, we're supporting less content that's been moved over. We can support that, move out of a support stage and start working on the next. So there's a lot of benefits of thinking about a phased approach. So all these together is planning how we're going to get through the migration and where we want to be. So at this stage, we have our begin state and our end state, and we know what we want to do. We can start preparing for the work that needs to happen here. The first thing I always recommend is housekeeping, your content tidy up. Get the site owners involved here and ask them to start looking at their own sites. Go out, communicate with the business. It's really important to get these guys on site. Talk to them as early as possible. Get them to look at their own sites. Think about how can they tidy it up. Do they have a whole bunch of team sites that they just don't use anymore, that never should have been created? Maybe they can be archived somewhere, maybe can be deleted straight away. The less content that we need to bring over, the easier our job is going to be. Also, if they have, if we identify areas where they're going to have issues, large lists is another one. You can tell this is something that was a big thing for us. Get them to start looking at it, get them to start creating views in their current sites, and then we don't have to deal with issues as we go through. So the more we can tidy up, the more we can clean the environment to start with, the better state we're in. Yep, archive, delete on new sites. Another thing we can start to do to prepare as well is, depending on your governance and how you create sites, we might want to move some site collections between content databases. There's a couple of benefits here. So we may have some content databases with hardly any content in, some with a lot in. So maybe we want to spread the load a bit. One thing I like to look at is getting those high-risk sites, those important sites we spoke about before. There's a couple of options. We can either move all of them into a single content database and they can be moved to a test environment permanently and dealt with. They can maybe dealt with by a high priority team. Or on the other side, maybe we don't want to put them all together. Maybe we want to split them across all our content databases, so we're only moving one important site at a time, and then we can deal with it, fix it, and then move on. So think about your own methods of how you want to do it, and then maybe, just again, it's preparation and understanding what you want to take and when. One benefit as well of cleaning up, we get to create a lot more free space in our databases. As I said before, the less content we move, the easier it becomes. We may also find a whole load of sites that really aren't that important. Your site owners will never agree to that. There's a lot that maybe, if they break for a few weeks, it doesn't really matter. There's other important stuff for us to focus on. So we might be able to just dump a load of those into some content databases that we can just move over, not really worry about, and focus on these other ones until we have time to look at them. So getting ourselves in a good place, again, this is going to help quite a lot. So at this stage, we haven't really done too much, but here we want to start thinking about actually implementing our upgrade process. My advice, start upgrading your customizations as soon as possible. I said before, this is something that was going to give quite a lot of issues. I'm from a developer background, but my ethos is still write code last. Try and do stuff out the box. It keeps them light. After being through numerous upgrade projects, it keeps your life a lot easier. I'm not saying don't write code. I'm just saying be sensible about it and don't do it just because your developers want to sit and write code all day. So the sooner we can start looking at these, the better. We had in the order of 250 customizations across the platform we had to look at. And this stuff, there were some pretty complex ones there as well. This took a long time. Chances are you won't have a production environment available right at the start. So I would say even if you don't have that there, it's not an excuse. Get on with it. Just fire up a VM, move stuff in, see what breaks and get on with it. Do the best you can until you've got a more stable environment to do it properly. So, but get on with it. So don't underestimate how long that can take. Also, there's a good opportunity here that maybe we've written some customizations for features that are now available in the new product. I know I've done this before. There's features thought, really wish I could do that. We've written it, and then Microsoft's actually come out and released it. So now we have our own version of doing something that Microsoft's done for us, or a third-party tool has done for us. So at this stage, rather than just upgrading the customizations, we may also want to consider, do we need to upgrade them? Is there a better way of doing this? Can we actually take our site or our application and actually do it in a better way? So if we're going to spend time on it, reevaluate it, go back to the designs. Also, as we're looking at these, start building test scripts. Moving into enterprise systems, I really like documentation and test scripts these days. And again, if we start creating all our test scripts here, then further down the line, that gives us a lot of the governance and a lot of the documentation we need as we go through the testing processes once we start looking at actually doing these. So go to your site owners, the people who know how this stuff works day to day, not necessarily just the developers who wrote it 5 years ago, and to get them to create the user acceptance test scripts. It's going to help you later on. Think about the branding and the UI. Chances are, if you do an upgrade, you may want to refresh your branding and your UI. You're probably going to have to rewrite it anyway, because as we know, the CSS changes quite significantly between versions. So this is something we're definitely going to have to look at. I had a note here saying update it if you feel you must. But I'm more functionality over form, but I quite like SharePoint and the way it looks, but that's just me as a techie. So keep it as simple as possible. Again, it just makes your life easier. I've seen numerous branding UI projects that just run away and cost thousands and thousands of pounds unnecessarily. So if you have a preferred agency, make sure they understand SharePoint. But again, start that early, figure out what's changed. This is something that can end up taking a bit more time than you expect. Script the environment build. One thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be running through the migration over and over and over. We're going to try it lots of times. So the more you can script, the more you can automate, the better your life is going to be. The less manual steps you have to do, there's less possibility here for human error to get involved and do things wrong. So PowerShell becomes your best friend. You have no idea how amazing PowerShell is until you start trying to go through an enterprise build of 200 odd servers. We want to try and work towards a very repeatable and a very controllable process. Like I said, we're going to be rebuilding it many times. So the intention is that we'll fix some defects, rebuild the environment, test it, and rebuild it. So we're going to do it over and over. But also, the more times that we do this, the better we're going to be. When we come to that big weekend when we've got to press the button and say go live, we want to have confidence that it's going to work. By scripting it and doing it over and over, we have that confidence. The scripts also form a nice part of the DR plan. as well. So if you've scripted the build of your environment, then who has a DR plan? I'm hoping you're all too scared to put your hand up. So the nice thing is, if we've scripted our environment build, then straight away we've got a really nice component that fits into our disaster recovery plan. If our environment goes down, catastrophic failure, we've got a script to rebuild it. Chances are a week, 2 weeks, a month after that, then there's a whole load of changes. So a DR plan needs to go above and beyond those scripts to deal with the delta, but we have a very, very good starting point here. So test the upgrade, see what breaks. Again, if we don't really have our production environment ready, keep testing it. Just keep working on it, get site owners involved early, get them to UAT it. Just keep testing it, keep doing it. This is a really good time to start your defect tracker. This little fella is going to become your friend in your life for a number of months. We went through about 5 different variations of our defect tracker until we got it right. This will be different for each of your environments as well, because it depends on how your teams are structured, how your environments work. But as we're going through and doing all the implementation stage and testing it, we're going to be raising a lot of defects. A lot of stuff's going to break. Expect it to happen. So we want to start categorizing our defects. Think about the priority. How important is it? And don't always go on your site owner's opinion. You need to work with them on a business level, say, right, through the whole triage process. And again, enterprise level, 10,000 team sites, not everyone is going to have a site that works at the end of it. We'll fix it afterwards, but we need to be realistic of what we can achieve in the time. So prioritize them. We found that we needed to break our defects down into a number of different phases. We had pre-defects, things that we could and should fix in the environment before we do the migration, creating new views on the list view thresholds on the large list. We could fix them in the current environment. So when we went through the migration, they just didn't exist anymore. But they're great ones. We can get them fixed nice and early, and they just go away. During fixes, there's a few that we identified that we couldn't do before because they needed to be on the new platform to use some of the new feature sets. So we needed to fix these during the migration weekend. So there's a whole bunch there that we knew we had. By managing this list here, we know how long that migration process is going to take. We know how many defects we need to manually fix or automatically fix. And then there's a lot that we considered could only be fixed post-upgrade, post-migration, and some that should be fixed post, because they're not really that important. We can just leave them open, we can do the upgrade, and then we can fix them after the fact. Some of them are just training. So a lot of people will raise a defect in SharePoint 2007 to 2010 upgrade, saying site actions has moved to the wrong side of the screen. It's broken. Great, we'll go to 2013, it's moved back again. So we can train, some of them are training issues as well, so we need to break them out and move them to the team. We can train people on the new way of doing things. Where have my links gone? How does this now work? For all of the defects that we get, we want to start writing remediation documents. We want to document step by step how we fix them. This is really important. This is because, again, if you're at that kind of scale, you're going to have a lot of people working on it. So a lot of people are going to be working on the same defects in different places. So if we have a nice documented process on how to actually fix those, then we can repeat it. We can also hand them to our support team. So if these defects get raised after the migration, they have a nice library of how to actually fix them. You'll find a lot of defects that are duplicates and repeats. Sometimes it's duplicate defects because the same person's raised the same issue. Sometimes we have the same issue that shows itself in a number of different locations. A key one we found here was between 2007 and 2010, the content query web part gave us quite a few issues because Microsoft rewrote it quite a lot. They gave us a lot of additional web part properties to handle the title and the description fields. They also introduced a data mappings property in the web part rather than custom view fields, but they don't move the custom fields over to there. So we had a lot of issues. So across the whole platform, we had a lot of defects. It was the same fix every time. There's about 300 defects that are raised. So we can group them together. We've got a remediation document, and as soon as someone raises it, the support team goes in and fixes it. So try to screw them as much as possible. There's a number of defects that get raised because the platform changes. So again, I've spoken about these quite a lot. So we can actually understand what's changed in the platform and how we need to go about changing. Maybe there's a new way of doing things. With 2010 to 2013, there will be a new set of common issues that come up. 2013 to VNet, there'll be a whole new set again. So it helps to understand what the platform's doing as well here. The more we can fix and re-architect in our current platform, the less effort we've got. So the more we can fix before, this is kind of within the housekeeping, but it's a little bit after. This is when we realise as we're testing it. But we can still go back and get our site owners to fix stuff in the existing platform. The less defects we're bringing through, the less work we've got to do. So again, this is why communicating with them is so important, because we can get them to do a lot of the work for us. So 2013, check the documentation. There will be changes to the platform. So if you're aware of what's changed and what's going to give you headaches, then you can be prepared for it. You might also get a few false defects. A couple of examples that we saw is because Kerberos is enabled, we moved all of our sites into a test environment, and we got a whole load of defects saying that all our RSS web parts don't work anymore because they don't support authenticated feeds when Kerberos is not enabled. So we had a couple of hundred of these going over. The web part's broken, of course the site owner is going to raise it as a defect. As far as they're concerned, it is. But we know that that's a false defect. We know when we go live and the DNS has changed, Kerberos SPNs are updated, then we know they're going to start working again. So we can let the site owners raise them, group them together, ignore them, give them some nice training that it will all be okay on the day. Another one as well, this has been around as long as the web has, hard-coded URL references. Our test environments are probably going to be on different URLs to our production environment. So any hard-coded URLs here are going to break. Again, site owners are going to see a break and they're going to raise a defect. So be aware of some more false defects. That's just 2 examples. There's a whole load more. Your own environment, you'll find your own. But this, I would also get somebody to own this day to day and report on it, how many high priority defects we have, how many are pre-enduring. This, like I said, this is going to be your life. This is going to make you decide when you can press that button and go live, when you're happy your environment's in a good state. So again, the more we repeat the process and test it, the more we fill this out, the more confidence we have that it's all going to work on the day. So at this stage, I like to just run through a process of continuous improvement. And we're not going to fix every defect and then do our migration. We're going to have to keep going through a cycle of this. And it's good for 2 reasons. It gives us a way that we can manage what we're fixing in our teams. If we have agile processes, maybe we concentrate on high priority ones, test it, and then move down the list. Also lets us test the fixes. We can't just leave it to the developers and the analysts to say, yep, I fixed it, it works on my dev machine, so when we go live it's going to be fine. Test the migration with them, make sure it's actually fixed and it's not going to break afterwards. Also, the more we do that, the more we do this continuous cycle, then the more times we're testing our migration, we're testing our environment build, we're testing our scripts, we're getting more comfortable with it. So my continuous improvement, what I like to do is have people fix a bunch of defects, blow away the test environment we've got, or maybe just the content, rebuild it using the scripts. Maybe when we're comfortable with building the environment, we may just want to blow away the content, but then perform the migration, test it, see which of those have actually been fixed, update the defect tracker, say, yep, defect 1, 2, and 3 are fixed. Oh, I found 2 more. Right, good, we know where we are. Start again, go back and fix the defects we've currently got, blow away our test environment, re-migrate it, we've practiced again, test the stuff, close off the ones that are actually fixed, raise some more, and we just keep going through that cycle over and over and over, continuously until we're comfortable, until our site owners are happy that their sites can be migrated, they've seen stuff get fixed, they've accepted stuff, some stuff won't, and we've tested it. So this can go on as long as it needs to. I mean, we spent quite a long period of time, maybe a year, just going through this process of doing it over and over and over. One thing that we came up with was our search index. When you're talking about this level of content, it's our searches generally take quite a few days. So a full index can take in the order of 4 days, 5 days. So sometimes you have sites that are reliant on the search index. They use search web parts to actually navigate people around and show content. People want to search for content. That's why we use SharePoint. So if we're going to go live and then we don't have any search indexes for a week, is that acceptable? There's a couple of options that we came up with in the end. First one was to actually rebuild the search indexes fresh, migrate it over, re-index on the new platform. That could take a long time. So a scenario we came up with is the ability to pre-index the old environment. So we set up search on our new environment, pointed it to the old environment, ran through the index, and then we turned search off. We froze the indexes at that point. So when the content was migrated over, we had a fully populated search index, so it still works. And then as it goes through the incremental crawls after that, it slowly reworks it on the new version of the content. And that proves to be quite a nice scenario. Okay, so once we're happy, once we're ready to actually go through and do the migration, we know we're ready to press that button, then we start thinking about the migration weekend. So in the scenario we were in, one thing that's quite difficult is it's an international company, so there aren't really any quiet periods. So this had to be managed on a large level with the communication team to say, look, this is work is going on, it's significant, you know, there's going to be some downtime here. There's no way we could really get around that. This is where going to phased approach helps, because if we do small sections, it's less noticeable, less work to do. So we just got everyone involved for a whole weekend, thought, right, we're just going to live in the office and get through it. One thing we needed to do was we needed to switch our old production environment to read-only. We actually had a read-only period of about a week. I'm purposely not saying who the company was because I'm not allowed to talk about them directly. So this is a combination of my experiences with multiple upgrades. So we needed a read-only period, because one thing you're going to realize is when you back up your SQL databases, when you're trying to back up 18 terabytes of information, that's going to take a period of time. If you back up your databases and then you spend 4 days doing your upgrade and people are changing stuff, well, that's just going to get lost. So you're going to need to make that read-only for a bit as you do your backup and your migration. So once we've had a read-only period, there's been no changes, we're happy to go ahead, then we can initiate the backups. Take them, restore them into the new environment. In this scenario, we're using DB migrate, so we are actually moving the databases over. So once they're restored into the new environment, I've missed off like installing customizations, that kind of stuff, but this is assuming we've got a platform built previously, and then this is the migration of the content. So at this stage, we can start to perform our drawing fixes. Okay, so the ones where the content has to be on the new environment, we can start working through this list. Some of these we could automate with PowerShell. Some of them were installations. Some of them were manual steps to actually fix them. So we had a big long list of everything, a whole team of people just sitting working through them, crossing them off the list. So then we're happy that's all done. Then we can look at changing our Kerberos SPNs and making our DNS changes. At this point, our new platform is live. Because this is about midnight on a Saturday, there's not many people using it. So at this point, yeah, we're live and we're on the new environment. This also helps us perform fixes on some of the false defects. So some of the areas where we have to have this stuff going in, it lets us do this. So at this stage, we can perform the high priority post fixes, the ones that have to happen after we've gone live. So we had another list of defects, another stack of remediation documents we could work through and start going through these. Some of these are high priority ones that could only happen after migration, so they're the ones we knew we had to get through before we could actually release it to the business. If we have time, fortunately, we actually went far better than we were expecting, and we started working on some of the low priority post defects in that same weekend, because by 3 or 4 in the morning we were bored. We thought we should probably do something rather than just play Xbox all night. So working through it. And then before we release it out to the business, what we decided we wanted to do is we actually wanted to make the new production read-only for a period of time. We wanted to give the platform enough time to bed in. We want to make sure that it wasn't going to fall over at 9 o'clock in the morning when everybody comes in and hits it. as much testing as you can do, there's always that uncertain moment when people come in for real. So we had another read-only period after we went live for a period of time. We had a period of time that we wanted it to be read-only, and then we just monitored the platform over it to see, do we need to stay read-only for that long, or do we have confidence that we can actually start letting people make changes? Because the key thing here is once we're live, as before, if people start making changes on the new platform and it totally falls over at 9 o'clock in the morning when everyone logs on, then we can't roll back because we're going to lose our changes. Okay, so we want to have a nice period of time that we had confidence the platform was going to work. Again, we came out of that period earlier than we were expecting because we practiced so many times. Things went better than we were hoping they would be. So then we can start looking at crawling the new content on the new platform, turn search back on, get it refreshing all the indexes. That's kind of invisible to users. That can run as long as it needs because people are getting search results. Now, when we exited that read-only period, this is when you're really live. Okay, so we went live here, but this is when we're really live. This is when people are changing stuff on the platform. This is the point of no return. This is when we can't roll back. So if we roll back, we're losing content, and it's very difficult to degrade content databases to, well, I don't think it's even possible. So you can't go back from 2013 to 2010 or 2010 to 2007. So this is the biggest decision: is when do we go past this point of no return? After here, because it's read write again, we can go through and we can start fixing off all of those low priority post defects. At this stage, we move into what we're calling post-go-live support. So we hand the platform over to the support teams. They're now in charge. We were still mobilised as the subject matter experts on the team to actually support the support teams. So they had all our remediation documents. They've been working with us throughout the whole migration process. They can now fix any new defects that come in. Obviously, we're 10,000 team sites. We couldn't test all of them, so we knew there'd be some defects that come up. Most of them, we already knew what they were. We knew how to fix them because we'd seen them before. We'd done it so many times, and it was very easy to fix them. Some were new, so some of them, the support teams just fixed off themselves. Sometimes they had to come through to us for a bit more knowledge of the business and how they worked. But then this is just a constant process. So how long you stay in this post-go-live support period is entirely up to you. You need to evaluate the priority of the defects you've got. When you're happy that the platform is now in a business as usual state, then you can exit post-go-live support and your migration is finished. This stage, it's a good option to move into quite a significant training program. There'll be a lot of new features in the new platform, so you want to go and teach users how to use them, release them progressively in, start making updates. So you're into business as usual here. And most importantly, you get to have a post-go-live party. I don't recommend you do that straight after the weekend because you're pretty tired. So a couple of weeks after, and and that's when you're fully upgraded and migrated. So I've come in about 15 minutes early, so I'm happy to take some questions if anyone has any.